You're listening to the Sex Addicts Recovery Podcast, a place for sex addicts to share their experiences of recovery, to help break the stigma, myths, and misconceptions of sex addiction. This podcast may contain topics of sexuality, sexual trauma, dysfunction, or other things that may be triggering, so listener discretion is advised. Hello and welcome to the Sex Addicts Recovery Podcast. My name is Jason, I'm a sex addict, and I will be your podcast host for today. How's it going, everyone? Welcome to the real episode number 30 of the Sex Addicts Recovery Podcast. In the previous episode, I totally made a mistake thinking that it was episode 30 when it was actually episode number 29. Upon posting the episode, I had written episode 30 and said it in the recording, and as it was going up, I saw episodes 27 and 28, but no number 29, and quickly made the correction to the wording, but I didn't go in and re-edit the audio. Progress, not perfection. Letting go of that perfectionism. Just after that happened, I was able to go to my home meeting and select a reading on perfectionism. Doing what I can to let that one go. Anyway, welcome again to the real episode number 30. This week, I'll be sharing a conversation that I had with David W. from Long Beach. It was really awesome to connect with him. He found the podcast and wrote in and asked if he could be a guest. And I'm really excited to be sharing that conversation. In the previous episode with Tim R. from the UK, I had mentioned that I made a mistake in this episode. So in the conversation that I had with David, we were talking about step 9 and putting ourselves on our amends list. And I mentioned that I thought that it was someone at the Serenity on the Sound retreat in the step 8 and 9 workshop that mentioned the higher power can forgive you, why can't you? It was actually Tim in the recording from last week that he mentioned that. So anyway, for the reading this week, I wanted to read from the Green Book on step 8. This is on page 47. Many of us were surprised when it was suggested that we put our own name on our amends list. We forgot to take into account the harm we did to ourselves. In our addiction, we often took poor care of ourselves and acted in self-destructive ways. We may have betrayed our own values or damaged our own self-worth. Putting our own name on the list helps to develop a sense of compassion for ourselves and encourages us to begin treating ourselves with care and respect. Like I mentioned in this conversation with David, that this is the first time that I've put my own name on my amends list in steps 8 and 9. While we were talking, we covered a lot of different topics, and towards the end of the conversation, we talked about the music of Heilung, who I had mentioned in episode number 25. And I'll be playing some clips of their music that we talked about in this episode towards the end of the episode. Now I'm ready to turn it over to the conversation with David, so here it is. Please enjoy.
Well, I appreciate you letting me come on. You know, I heard your guys' podcast. I don't know how I found it other than I'm sure I just searched sex addiction. Okay. And then I started listening to yours. And then at work, I'll listen to it, and on my breaks and stuff. Like I just listened to, I think it's Bill I's story earlier today, and I listened. I really liked the KOSA stuff. In fact, then I looked up KOSA, and I don't push anything on my spouse, but I know that in the past she had said, I wonder, she's like, it'd be nice if there was something for like families like ours. And so I just sent it to her, and I don't say anything else. I don't feel like it's my place to say, hey, you need to go do this or do that.
Exactly.
But yeah, so I just thought, maybe this is a way of being of service. I don't know if it is, but I know the stories that I've heard, it has helped me. on the podcast. So I thought, maybe I can give back some.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I think sharing stories is a great way to get the message out, not only to others in recovery, but to those that are outside the rooms, to help kind of destigmatize what sex addiction is and what it isn't, and really gives humanizes us and gives us a voice for recovery.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've already started the recording, and I just wanted to do a formal introduction here. And so I'm grateful to have David here sharing his story of being in SAA. And David, where are you coming from? I think you're in Southern California?
Yeah, I'm in Southern California. The nearest, I guess the biggest city that most people would know is Long Beach, California. I live in a smaller city, but basically Long Beach, California.
Awesome. One of the things that I usually do to start off the interviews is talking about inner, middle, and outer circles. Are you comfortable sharing your circles?
Yeah, definitely. So my inner circle is any sex outside of my marriage, particularly paying for sex of any form, or cruising, going to any either venue or website where the purchasing of a sexual act is available, as well as viewing hardcore pornography. And another thing that's on there, I put it in there. I actually have never had issues with this, but I put it in there nonetheless. I just felt like I was supposed to. If I go to a bar by myself, I constitute that as well as inner circle behavior, and otherwise that's pretty much it.
Yeah, I can definitely see why. I had a friend of mine. We used to. One of our friends plays music in a band, and going out to their concert solo would be kind of a triggering thing. And a lot of his gigs were in bars and stuff. So going with another person definitely helps out.
Yeah. That's the thing. So, but middle circle.
Yeah.
The way I kind of have always viewed, not always, that's not true. The way I have come to view the circles is the inner circle is my solution, the middle circle is my real problems, and the outer circle is my higher power solution. So my inner circle is actually pretty broad.
Yeah.
My inner circle is if I'm feeling self-pity. A lot of it's feelings, and a lot of it is the way I think. But there are a lot of actions in there I'm slowly starting to realize that I put in there. So lots of feelings of self-pity, feeling the I want feeling, I want this, I want that. Why don't I have this? Why don't I have that? If I hate my job, that's usually a sign. If I start having very racial or racist thoughts, that's usually a pretty solid indicator that I'm in my middle circle. What else is there? If I'm isolating from my wife and my kids, if I'm getting very angry with my kids or short-tempered with my kids as well as my wife, if I'm not making phone calls in SAA, when I'm doing my online Zoom meetings at SAA, but I'm just really surfing the internet while I'm casually listening to the meeting. And it's a pretty broad list, and it's something I do need to work on writing out more. But that I would say those are my big focus ones. Yeah, I'd say that's at least for now, my main focus within my middle circle.
Yeah, those are all fantastic.
And then when it comes to outer circle, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, what about your outer circle?
Yeah, so with outer circle, that's something I'm maybe barely starting to scratch the surface on learning. Because initially my outer circle was kind of like, okay, doing step work, meditating, and I thought that was pretty much it. Because for me, I'm I'm barely scratching the surface on learning how to enjoy my own company and like being comfortable with myself and going out and doing things for myself. A lot of things that, and I can kind of explain later, a lot of things that I had a lot of interest in when my acting out really kind of took off, all my interest in those things just disappeared.
Yeah.
Like they had no more value, no more, and so that's something I'm learning. So like something I've started to do is that I've tried to do is certainly fantasy was a big part of my problem in my addiction. But like everything, you know, there's a flip side to it. So obviously it was bad, but I believe it could be put to good use. So I've started writing, and I kind of write little short stories, more for myself to try to entertain myself. But I hope to get good enough that I could write stories for my kids that can entertain them. And otherwise, I'm still trying to expand my outer circle, especially in the arena of self-care and self-love. But again, that's something I'm like within the last couple weekends, I'm starting to realize I don't know how to do, and I need to relearn it.
Yeah, when you mentioned having those interests that fell away during your active acting out period, guitar for me was one of those that slipped away from importance. And self-care as well. And so, yeah, definitely coming back to those older hobbies, and finally learning to take care of ourselves are definitely important things.
Yeah. I was. Go ahead.
Yeah, you go ahead, please.
I was going to say, just reading. I'm working step 8 right now, and it talked about how, like, we put our own name down on the list in the Green Book. And I'm just really starting to realize how much in my active addiction I really did ignore my true needs and the higher ideals of myself. And like I remember, I don't know if it was on your podcast or in meetings or on the podcast, like somebody said a middle circle behavior is not showering. And I was like, oh gosh, yeah, I was the same way. I just became like a dirty, gross dude. And it's just interesting to me realizing that, because a lot of times when the Green Book talks about it, or I hear it in meetings, like the amends we owe ourselves, my instinct is to be like, oh, that's kind of that hippy dippy, whatever nonsense. But as I try to be humble and listen, especially to the Green Book, that's something I'm trying to take more seriously than I have been. And it's like, well, if the Green Book says it's obviously there for a reason, and maybe I should take it seriously.
Yeah, one of the things that I find interesting about the Green Book and things that are in there, and this is true of meetings as well, is realizing that if other people are talking about it, I'm not the only one that has experienced these kinds of things. So a lot of things that are written in there, really hit me right in the chest. It's like, oh yeah, I feel that. How about, are you comfortable with sharing kind of like a mini first step, or what your childhood was like, and how you made it into the rooms of SAA?
Yeah, how I qualified for it.
Yeah.
I earned my seat.
Yeah.
I'll try to do a mini first step. I'm definitely a person who can talk. So feel free to let me know when I need to pipe down.
Yeah, and we can keep it conversational, but just kind of taking it with how you were brought up, how you were raised and stuff, and then we can go on from there.
Okay, yeah. So I'm the 6th of 7 children. I live in the city that I was raised in. I was raised in a Mormon family. like Mormon as far back as, the beginning roots of Mormonism in Eastern United States. I have a direct ancestor who's, one of the multiple wives of Brigham Young, and Mormonism runs deep in my family, and it's something that I now have mixed feelings for, but I'm very fond for it. I'm not active in the church anymore. But occasionally I still go to church with my kids, and I served a mission for the church in Georgia, where I went out for 2 years, proselytizing. But yeah, so I was the sixth of 7 kids, and my life was pretty ideal. My mom is an amazing woman. My dad worked a lot, to provide for us as kids, and he was also very active in church leadership. So he was gone a lot. I would say the vast majority of my life, my dad has been either at work or doing stuff for the church. And so he emotionally wasn't a huge role in my life, but I wouldn't say I ever felt neglected by him, because it's the only experience I've ever had with a father. So to me, my whole life growing up, it was pretty normal.
Wow. Yeah. Before moving on, just thinking about Mormonism, I have one of my sponsees is an ex-Mormon, and in high school, I went to school. I lived down the street from a Mormon church, so a lot of my high school friends were Mormons as well, and some of them are still with the church, and some of them are not. But yeah, I am quite familiar. So.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, please continue.
Yeah. So I mean, the religion of my birth certainly is going to play a pretty big role. So, but I guess I'll just jump straight into it. My first experience with pornography, like many people, was at a young age. I was in 4th grade. I'm trying to think how old a 4th grader is. Right, I think maybe they're around 10, 8 or 9, right?
Yeah.
11?
Yeah.
Okay,
10,
yeah.
10, well, yeah.
No, 10, yeah.
Yeah, you're right. About 9 or 10, I guess.
Yeah, I'm thinking my daughter's 11 and she's in 6th grade. So,
yeah.
But I remember seeing it at a sleepover, and I have memories actually of it still. But whether those memories are accurate at this point, I don't know. But I also remember I wasn't aroused by it. I really didn't know what was going on. But, eventually as I started being exposed to more pornography and sexuality, my brain was like, oh, now I know what that was. Like, it could remember that experience and like the confusion I had in it. But, I first started dabbling with pornography, and not even pornography. Like I would like look at the WWF girls and download pictures of them and print them off at my friend's house, bring them home and masturbate in my room to them. And that was for most of my junior high years. And that's kind of what I was doing. I was caught once viewing pornography at my home. I don't remember my parents chatting with me about it. I'm sure they did. I was pretty much banned from the internet in my home, unless I was pretty much under direct supervision by my mom. And that was, that was kind of embarrassing and shameful. I remember being caught once masturbating in my bed, and she like opened the door and she's like, I know what you're doing and it's not okay. Or it's wrong. I can't remember, but I remember being caught. And there was just things, I had to keep secret that I was ashamed of. And, but at the same time, it was exciting and, I liked it. But I knew I shouldn't be doing it. In Mormonism, it's called the law of chastity, and it's pretty strict. It's our strict, traditional, I don't know, whatever we want to call it. But the emphasis is, no masturbation, no sex before your marriage, no touching of private parts before marriage and things like that. And I've basically been taught that since a very, very, very young age. I don't know how early they start teaching it, but they start teaching that concept, I would say, early. And so I had a lot of shame and fear and secrecy around viewing pornography. But I also, looking back when I was doing my fourth and even my first step, I already at this time had really unhealthy behaviors of sexuality, but it wouldn't like cross my mind. I remember I was reading erotic literature in middle school and I masturbated in class. And I remember thinking after I had done it, oh, that's probably not a smart thing to do. Like I shouldn't do this again.
Yeah.
And I don't believe I did do it again, but, I started looking back, I can see, my behavior wasn't always the greatest. And I didn't have, I guess, I don't know if it's common sense. Maybe it's not, I don't know. But, yeah, so that continued on, and I viewed a lot of pornography, and I did that for years, and keeping it secret, mainly doing it at my friend's house. And again, something I do, and I didn't really, at the time, I never even thought it was weird, and now I look back and I go, what was I thinking? But I would go to my friend's house to view porn. He'd hang out, he'd be playing video games, but I would sit on the computer at his place, watching porn. Not most of the time, but a large portion of the time. And I'd masturbate there in the chair, and he's back playing video games. And I remember him a couple times saying, what are you doing? And I don't know if he didn't know what I was doing or, I don't know, but I look back and I go, what was it like? Look, good gracious, man. Like, come on. Like, what am I thinking? And, but again, it didn't even cross my mind in that moment because, something I've learned later is I pretty much get tunnel vision when I'm in pornography. Like,
yeah.
I don't know. It would take something pretty big to wake me up from the tunnel vision that I get in. And that actually causes me a lot of fear sometimes. Fear that if my acting out behavior when I had that tunnel vision, fear, I have no way of knowing, but I truly hope that my children have never walked in. But I know I have been irresponsible in that behavior. I don't think they ever have. And, but that is something that I worry about, that maybe there's damage I've done and I don't even know about it.
Yeah.
But I have no way of knowing that. And, but I do know with that's one of the ways in my acting out that I was just tremendously irresponsible. And it's not, I know it is in large part because of the shame and the secrecy, I guess, the way I did it. I hope I can teach, I have 3 sons. I hope I can teach them when they come of age, and they start masturbating, like, okay, hey, there's right ways of doing this and there's wrong ways of doing this. And I'll have a list of wrong ways of sharing with them.
Yeah, I'm
how I did that.
Currently raising, my son's 12, and when you were talking about your mom walking in on you, I've walked in on him, and we've had discussions since he's been about 9. We've read a sexuality book, but I was letting him know that what you're doing is normal. It's okay, and we've talked about some different levels of what's okay and what's not, and in terms of appropriateness, with looking at stuff on devices and stuff, and it's like, you're definitely not old enough to be doing that. But I'm trying to pull back on the shame aspect to help him have a healthier view than, at least from healthier than what I grew up with, because I know that that sense of shame can bring the shame spiral and make it tend to make things even worse.
Yeah, no, I agree. For all my kids, my daughter, my sons, I hope that they have, I want to teach them and, share with them. So about sexuality so they can have healthy, wonderful sexual lives. That's something I do want for my kids. I don't want them to go through, the shame and the guilt and insane amounts of shame and guilt and self-hatred. I remember contemplating all the time, why is this bad? Mm-hmm. Like, what is it that God hates about this? I don't understand it. Like, I get we don't want to get girls pregnant, outside of marriage, or outside of committed relationships. I get that. But I was like, why is it's just something, and that's something with time, as I am in recovery and I get healthier, I trust that my higher power, talking with my wife, reading books, like you said, finding good books about sexuality is something, I can share with my children. But yeah, so that the bulk of my time, I was viewing porn and masturbating. I eventually got a girlfriend in high school, and we became sexually active pretty quick. She had already been sexually active, and she said she wanted to have sex, and I said okay, and we had sex, and that was my first time having sex. And I remember walking home, and I felt numb. It wasn't an enjoyable experience. It wasn't an unenjoyable experience. It was just like I felt numb because I walked home thinking, oh, now I'm going to hell. And Mormonism doesn't really have a concept of like hell, fire, and brimstone, but it's basically like, oh, I can't be with my family for eternity now. So now I have to be alone for eternity, which is basically hell. And we continued to have a pretty active sex life for 6 months. But it was pretty unhealthy too. We had sex in a lot of public places, and it was irresponsible, and it was never protected. The fact that she didn't get pregnant is baffling to me, in part because I didn't know much about sex in general, and it was an unhealthy relationship. I broke up with her in a very rude and awful way, and that's another thing that just showed me how I don't know why. I don't, again, the way I was brought up was to be respectful and kind to women, but I don't think, I don't know why, but when it came to sexuality with women, I had no clue what the fuck I was doing and how to be respectful and courteous. And the only conclusions I can come to is, one, because I felt so guilty for even doing it and hated myself so much for engaging in it, even though I wanted to engage in it, but I was bad for doing it. I don't know how to explain it. It was just the moment any type of sexuality entered my relationship with a woman, I was not healthy with it ever. And that's something I've learned looking back. And at this point, when I broke up with her, she called my family, and she's like, and this is about the time I was going to go on my mission for my church, and they got pretty strict standards if you're going to go, represent the church. She called the house and said, hey, David's hasn't been, getting ready to go on his mission because we've been having sex. And, I remember hearing that. I think my mom was there. I'm sure my dad was there, and then playing the recording for me to hear that. Oh. And, that was exciting stuff, and a lot of shame and more guilt and more just more I'm a bad person. Eventually I talked to that woman years later, and she was going through a 12-step program, and she apologized for it. And at this, I have no resentment towards it. Like, we're just we were young dumb kids. Yeah. And it is what it is. But as I prepared to go for my mission, they said, you cannot masturbate or view pornography for 6 months if you want to go on your mission. And I said, okay. And I went to the Mormon church has its own 12-step program. It pretty much follows the 12 steps, but it's obviously very built into the Mormon theology. Mm-hmm. And I went to 1 or 2 meetings, and I never masturbated, never viewed porn. It wasn't even difficult. Wasn't even difficult, not in the slightest. And so for that reason, I don't think I was addicted to pornography or these compulsive sexual behaviors yet. But again, long story short, I came home from my mission. I married my spouse 6 months back from my mission. I'm 22. I think she's 20 or 21. And 6 months into that, I started viewing porn again. And when I viewed porn this time, it was a whole different ball game. It was a whole different ball game. The way it affected me was different. Mm-hmm. And I'm confident the moment I viewed porn, the first time I viewed pornography in my marriage, I was then addicted to it. And that addiction led to me eventually acting. I had phone sex with a coworker. I made out with her. I never had physical sex with her. When I made out with her, it freaked me out so much that I quit my job and we moved to Idaho to go to a church school out there. Our marriage was struggling. We fought all the time. I just hated myself, and the self-hatred came out in a lot of anger towards my wife. And we thought, maybe by moving to Idaho, going to a church school, really trying to focus on spirituality, that'll help our marriage even more. And this is I think 3 years into our marriage. Then we're in Idaho. I'm still struggling. It's not getting any better. I go to the 100th bishop that I've gone to, and I talk to him about it. And eventually I just go, I'm going to tell my wife. I can't keep this a secret. I'm not going to tell her about, the coworker that I cheated on her with, but I'm going to tell her about the pornography. And I told her, and I'm telling you, I don't think a spouse could respond any better than my spouse responded, which was, okay, this explains a lot. And, thanks for telling me, and let's work on this now,
Wow.
Just totally fine, totally rock solid. And I'm so insane. And I've been so sick that, I was able to stay clean for a few months. I was able to white knuckle it. But eventually I got frustrated and resented my wife's response because, and I'm not joking, I literally thought, if you're not mad at me, how am I supposed to be scared enough to stop? How can you not be mad at me? How can you not, and things like that. And so I thought for the longest time my problem was the internet. My problem was the internet. My problem was my sex drive. And if I get rid of the internet, because when I got caught viewing porn as a kid, my parents pretty much banned the internet from me. And for the most part, that kept me away from pornography. And so that was my thought. I was like, okay, sweetie, we just need to get rid of the internet. That's that, that's just the way we have to live. And my wife's like, no, we're not getting rid of the internet. And this was a fight we had for years. And in my mind, it's like, why don't you love me enough to get rid of the internet? Don't you see the internet's my problem? Don't you see that if we didn't have the internet, all my problems would go away? And I resented her so much for that. And, it's just some more of my insanity. And eventually viewing porn wasn't enough. And I started to get interested in prostitutes. I was in the Marine Corps at the time, the Marine Corps Reserves. So once a month I'd drive about 4 hours away to go to my training unit, come back. And twice I stopped at a hotel to meet with prostitutes. Both times I was too scared to go through with it. I paid the prostitutes, thanked them for, their time, but I didn't go through with it. But just the planning it, the setting it up was exciting.
Oh yeah.
Gave me that high that.
Yeah. I was going to say it's part of the drug.
Yeah, exactly. That was a huge part. But for me, my acting out time, I've heard some people say how, it was so good and great. For me, throughout all the time that I'd acted out, I would go through almost within minutes of each other moments of just tons of self-hatred. And then I'd have these moments of excitement, and then I'd hate myself again. And it would just flip-flop back and forth. When I acted out, I did not have super long periods where this is great, I'm loving life. It was oh, this is exciting. Oh, I hate myself. What am I doing? I'm a horrible person. And I always had this struggle because basically from the moment I started, I wanted to stop. And I'd go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And in the end, you know, a lot of the stuff I'm not covering is my wife and I fought all the time, constantly. I just had tons of hatred towards myself. And again, that came out on my wife and my kids. And eventually our marriage was pretty much falling apart. My wife's mental health was falling apart. She left on, I think, 2 or 3 occasions, left with the kids, didn't tell me when I was at work, and would drive from Idaho to California. You know, I eventually quit my job. Long story short, I got so sick, it got to the point, and all along this, I feel like it was safe to say if I was not sexually insensitive, I was sexually abusive, I think is more likely the answer in pressuring my wife to do things. But it ultimately peaked in, I guess the only way I can say it is, let's see. I don't feel comfortable saying what I would say in the rooms, but the sexual abuse went to another level that it hadn't gone to before, without my spouse's consent, and that blew up. I don't know how this sounds, but I truly didn't know that what she accused me of took place. Like, in my mind, I thought everything was good. I truly thought that at the time. And for months and a long time, I thought that, until the more I got into recovery and the more I could look back and see what I was doing and what I had become. And as a result of October 18th, 2017, that night, exploded in the next day or two to where my wife attempted to take her life. She texted me, thankfully, and I was at the park with my kids. We had already said we were getting divorced at that point, and she is alive, today, thankfully. And at that point, I was like, okay, there's something wrong with me. And again, I'm sorry, I'm really trying to keep this short. When we were separated, going through the divorce process, I noticed my wife was getting better and I was getting worse. I then began to act out with prostitutes, and going through with that. And this was after, I tried the whole become even more religious, do all these different things. And I would do all these, the Mormon answers that it would take to solve this, and none of them were solving it. I would always, I would do all the things I thought I was supposed to do. And then once that was done, it's like, oh man, I'm looking up prostitutes now. And I just realized I was getting worse and worse and worse and worse. And I finally met a man in my church who had gone through AA, and he was my first sponsor going through the Mormon fellowship. And he was the first one to really teach me that just like alcohol isn't the alcoholic's problem, my addictive sexual behaviors weren't my real problem, but I was the problem.
Yeah.
And that was a light bulb. I didn't know that. I thought for my whole life, the internet's the problem. I have an overactive sex drive. That's the problem. My wife's too prudish. That's the problem. I did not want to conceive of the idea that, oh, maybe I'm the problem. And that was a major moment in my life, realizing that I was the problem. That not even the sexual acting out was the problem; it was me, and that was just a symptom of my problem.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say that. I had a lot of those same thoughts that my wife just doesn't understand. I've been trying to get these hits every night, and since I was a kid, and so I've got this hyperactive sex drive, and just trying to put all the blame elsewhere, and then realizing that it's not really about the sex drive. It's the things that I'm covering up, the things that I'm ignoring, all the other problems in my past that I'm just trying to cover up, and definitely coming into the rooms helped me with that.
Yeah. Same here. All of a sudden, I've heard an acronym for denial I like, don't even know I'm lying. And that was me. I was living in total denial. I didn't even know it. I was so deep in denial. I had no idea. And as I started realizing things, it was easy for me to believe them. Not everything, but some of those things were. And so, I started going through the 12 steps, especially through the Mormon Church's 12 steps. I initially started a different S program. Eventually my wife and she saw the change in me. I did a 9-step amends with her. She looked across the table and said, I can't believe I still have feelings for you. And we got back together. And after being together for a little while, I thought I was cured. And 6 months later, I went out and acted out with a prostitute again. And I was like, okay, no, I'm a sex addict. Like it or not, this is what I am. And 3 months after that, I told her about my relapse. That was January or February of this year, because that was one of our agreements. If we're getting back together and I'm acting out again, I have to tell her. And I told her, and it was super brutal on her. And I had to accept, if this ends the marriage, it ends the marriage. That recovery again is for me, because I don't want to live the way I live when I'm acting out. And she, she didn't like it, obviously, and she couldn't believe it happened. But my wife is incredibly patient and forgiving and a spiritual woman. I don't know how someone can be as spiritual as she is, but she just is. And we're working through it. And about that point is when I decided to go to SAA, and I got an SAA sponsor, and I've been, working the steps and learning and growing, and my inner circle has shifted a few times. And I'm, currently I'm in the position, I'm trying to follow the advice in the Green Book, where it says, we picked our most destructive sexually acting out behaviors and work through those first. Mm-hmm. I have masturbation in my inner and outer circle. Mm-hmm. I feel like that's okay. But if it's not okay in the long run, I'm fine with that. My sponsor talks about, experimenting and seeing, is it compulsive? Is it not? And, but, thankfully, I haven't acted out with a prostitute since October of last year, and I have not cruised for prostitutes, I think, since January of this year. And those are the biggest things for me right now to make sure I take care of. And I just started, my first service responsibility in my group now as the literature chair. Mm-hmm. And I'm just thankful for SAA, and it's my life is very, very much different than I ever imagined it would be. And I'm happy to be where I'm at. I'm not in the position yet where I'm happy about my addiction. I'm not in the position yet where I'm like, oh, all this was necessary. There was a woman on the podcast that talked about that recently. Mm-hmm. I think she was the COSA speaker, and I admire that, and I aspire to accept all these things are necessary. But I can honestly say I'm not there yet.
Yeah. Sometimes it can take a long time, but as long as we're actively working our program one day at a time, doing the next right thing, eventually we get there. I am in constant shock that I've been in the program since 2002, and back then I didn't think that nearly 20 years later that I would still be going to meetings and recording a podcast and doing all these other service things. But just little by little, working the steps, doing it one day at a time, has definitely helped. I've had my definite shares of relapses. So, when you mentioned, being sober for a certain period of time and then relapsing back with a prostitute, I definitely have felt those moments where, I'm feeling pretty good about things and get a little too high and mighty and get boom right back into it. But as long as we keep working at it one day at a time, eventually, our attitudes shift and we find a new spiritual awakening, which is a godsend. And it's so weird for me to talk about stuff like that, coming into this program as an atheist agnostic and having had a spiritual awakening working these steps. So it's a beautiful program.
Yeah, well, the God thing initially was easy for me, and then it became hard for me all of a sudden, because as I was coming into the rooms, and when I was first doing this, my initial sponsor, who again was from AA, he was like, just get to a 12-step meeting. He's like, I don't care if it's NA, AA, ARP is what they call it in the Mormon church. Mm-hmm. He's like, just get to a meeting. And I would go to these meetings, and all of a sudden, the way I was taught about God, I was like, the message I was hearing about a higher power in 12-step meetings, like it radically shifted my understanding of God. But I also came to this point, especially when I first started SAA at the beginning of this year, was I had old notions of God that I had to get rid of, but my notions of God are so deeply ingrained into me. I was taught since I was an infant the doctrine of Mormonism. And again, I don't think I should have resentments towards the church. I think for the most part, for many people, it gives them lots of purpose and direction to do a lot of good in life. And, I was one of many who, as a result, it wasn't helpful in bringing me to God. And, but that has been a difficult thing because I have so many just deeply rooted beliefs in God and that aren't helpful to me. And recognizing them hasn't always been easy for me either. Like, cause again, they're not even question notions. They're like foundational ideas in my mind of what or who God is. And so I had my sponsee brother gave me this advice where he's like, why don't you just write down on paper who you want your higher power to be?
Yeah.
And oh man, that was just so helpful because I was like, okay. And I only wrote a few things. I wrote, God's all powerful and there's not a problem in my life. I didn't want to get emotional. There's not a problem in my life he can't help me with. And I can be forgiven for the awful things I've done in my life, and my life can still have value. And I don't have to be defined by all the awful things I did. And I have to believe that. I still struggle sometimes, but I go, if I know God can forgive me, I can forgive myself. Mm-hmm. And I can go on and live a good life. And even if other people don't forgive me, which is totally understandable, I go, I have to forgive myself because otherwise that can take me out. My own resentment towards myself will take me out. And, I know it's going to take time, but for me, that's the foundational principles of my higher power. My higher power can handle anything that's thrown at me in my life. And my higher power forgives me for all the things I did when I was sick.
Yeah, that's beautiful. It really, the retreat that I was on this past weekend, we were talking about steps 8 and 9. That's where I currently am in my step work, going through the steps again. And it sounded like you were on step 8.
Yes, sir.
When we were talking about, in the Green Book, putting ourselves down, making amends with ourselves. And this is, I've gone through the steps a couple of times, and this is the first time that I put myself down on that list and wondering, how how do I go about doing this? And the message I heard in that workshop is that, with the higher power of our understanding, that we have, can be forgiving. And, like exactly like what you were just saying, that, God can forgive us for all the bad stuff that we've done. And then the person in that workshop said, why can't you forgive yourself? And are you higher than God? And so if God can forgive you, you can forgive yourself. And that just touched me, and something that I had not been able to think about before. So I was really grateful to be in that workshop, to hear that message and to hear your definition of a higher power. Yeah, definitely. Just earlier this year, I did an exercise on what my higher power is and what my higher power isn't. Just a couple of, just one line statements, and that's all it really needed to be. And it really, really helped me out. I can't remember exactly what I wrote, but something pretty similar to what you were just describing.
Yeah, I like that. Sometimes identifying something, what it isn't, helps me identify what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Like for me, like, what is a spiritual life? What is a healthy relationship with my wife? I don't always know what the answer to what a healthy relationship is, but I definitely have a lot of things I can say what it isn't.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that helps me identify, eventually with time, what it is. I like that approach. And that's what I like hearing. I like hearing, what is it? I don't know the way to put it. Things I can do. That's what I like. Action, experiences I can take. I can test them. I can say, oh, this does work for me. This does bring me in closer contact with my higher power, or it doesn't. And like, I've tried that with different forms of meditation. What is it that brings me in, the way I used to pray, that hasn't been very helpful. Reading the scriptures. I was raised, Mormonism is very big on reading the scriptures. That doesn't do anything for me. But reading the Green Book, reading the daily meditations on the website from Voices of Recovery, reading some other 12-step literature, that stuff helps me. And what helps me a lot is listening to other people's stories. Because when I hear other people's insanity, it reminds me I'm insane too. Mm-hmm. And it wakes me up, because I get, if I'm just barely realizing this. For me, my weekdays are really good. I'm usually a really happy husband, a really happy father, going good. And then the weekend comes and my resentment and self-pity comes bubbling out all over again. And this happened this past weekend. And I was just, poor, pitiful David, all the world's against me. My life is so hard, and, it's amazing. It's a total delusion. But it happens quite often. And I was thinking about it, and I was like, you know what I don't do on the weekends? I don't wake up. I don't do my morning meditations and prayers, sincerely being present in them. I don't read from my Green Book. I take my weekends off from my step work, because I think, I have a pretty busy schedule, a pretty demanding career that's difficult for me, that I'm learning. I'm starting a new career. And so I'm going to sleep in on the weekends. And it was just today I was talking to someone. I was like, I can't do that, because at least where I'm at right now, if I take a day off from doing that stuff, I go back into the delusional, insane state of my addictive brain. And it's just, that's something for me, I got to do every day if I don't want to go back to that place. Because the reality is I go back to it quickly. And I know, like, my middle circle, if I feel lots of self-pity is one of the things that took me out this past October when I went and acted out again. I remember the thoughts that were running through my head. I remember how I justified acting out. And when I'm sane, I can hear all those excuses and say, oh, this is insanity.
Mm-hmm.
But when I'm not sane, when I'm not connected to my higher power, or when I'm not even trying to be connected, because I don't even know if I am connected to my higher power. I just know I'm trying to be. But when I'm not doing those things, insane thoughts seem perfectly sane to me. And that's just been my experience.
Yeah. I suffer from a lot of negative self-talk, and definitely when I'm out of the pattern of being at meetings, reading program stuff, working on my step work, I can just fester in those negative thoughts and that victim mentality, and that brings opportunity, justification for me to go act out. And so it's a difficult spot to be in. So yeah, the reminder of daily prayer, of doing step work, keeps me right-headed. And I can tell you, working on the podcast here has really helped pull me out of that stinking thinking a couple of times. Sometimes it's when I've been recording intros and outros, I haven't been in the best state of mind, and it takes a long time to get into that rhythm. But the more I start talking about the program, I start to lift myself out of the thoughts that were in my head previously. And it's been hugely beneficial, and especially hearing people that are finding the podcast and getting a lot out of it, and getting to hear that what we're doing here in the Bay Area is really helping out people across the world. It's just a humbling experience, and grateful to be able to do that.
Yeah, I love this podcast. I believe you said it's part of the Bay Area intergroup, and I appreciate everything that the group's doing. I know for me, it's one of the things I was like, I have a 30-minute lunch break, and I go, whether I'm listening to this podcast or another thing on sex addiction, it's something I have to do at noon, because I got to constantly recenter myself. One of the things I loved, I listened to it recently on here, the one you did on music when you introduced the Who, that Mongolian group.
Yeah.
And I liked it. I went home. I showed my wife the group immediately, and it was so funny because I don't think it was that same podcast. It was another one where you talked about Heilung. Yeah. And my wife and I had been listening to Heilung all year, and so we had heard the Who, and we're like, oh, this is. My first thought was like, oh, this is just like Heilung. And I think you played the song Narupo, and that's like one of my wife and I's favorite songs. My favorite is they do Alpha. I can't pronounce it. Alfadhirhaiti.
Oh yeah.
The All Father.
Yeah.
And that podcast you did on music appreciation really helped me reconnect with music, because music's something I abandoned in Mormonism. Because the way this is just my interpretation and experience in Mormonism. It's not a universal thing. I go to extremes, and I would listen to AC/DC and these other bands, and I was like, well, these lyrics aren't consistent with what I'm taught. So I just, I cut out the Beatles. I cut out so much music in my life because I was like, this is contrary to God's doctrine, God's ways. This is not something that all Mormons do. It was just me, right? And so reconnecting with music and the magical power that music can have over me. I really like that podcast, because a couple of these podcasts have focused, at least the way I've taken them, is on this outer circle. Mm-hmm. And again, for me, the outer circle is God's solution. My middle circle are my problems, me. My middle circle is me, when I'm caught in me. And my inner circle is my solution to my middle circle life. And so learning, like, okay, what are these outer circle things? What are these ways? Because I believe you talked about it being like this real tribal. I felt more connected to the earth And the way I see it, like Mother Earth and this idea of a feminine higher power, which has been absent in my life. And I felt more connected to it listening to Heilung and trying to listen to it in a meditative state almost, and appreciating it. And that's something I'm learning how to do, because there's times when I can really feel that, and there's times where I'm numb to it. And I just go, okay, these things take time. And I know these things are positive in my life. But yeah, I loved it when you played that, and I was at work and I was listening to it, and it actually reignited in me, like, oh yeah, this is the beauty of music. Like music has a spiritual, magical quality to it. And I loved that one. In fact, I probably am going to listen to it again.
Cool. Yeah. Heilung has been just, I am obsessed. I've got all their albums now. And let me see if I can try to pronounce this. Alfadhirhaiti, I think, is the pronunciation. It's the chant to Odin and the Allfather.
Yeah.
And I'll play a little bit of that on the end of this podcast. But yeah, the other day, someone on Facebook had posted, let's make, things are so rough out there. Let's make a playlist of you've I think it was called You've Got This, and it's like, okay, this Heilung song, Alfadhirhaiti, just that gets me going. It's like whenever I need some inspiration and some power, hearing that chant, oh my god, that is awesome.
Yeah.
And recently I've been working on a guitar video. I did a added guitar music to the song Troust.
Oh, cool.
From the Futhorck album. And so I started layering in guitars and trying to figure out how I can get it to sound a little bit more metal. It sounds really cool.
Yeah.
I'll put it up on Facebook, and eventually I'll put it up on YouTube once I have the whole song worked out, how I'd like to arrange it. But a couple of the other ones in my John, I don't know again how to pronounce that one. A lot of them, the words are Northern European, Danish, Norwegian, and German.
Yep.
But so I have a hard, with the German, I studied German for a long time, so I have an easier time with that. But some of the other languages I have a harder time figuring out how to pronounce that. But I try to sing along and chant with it, and that's been what's been playing in my car when I'm commuting, and it really energizes me yet relaxes me. It's the meditative state of having these nice 10-minute pieces that slowly build, and the percussion and the chanting and everything, and then Maria's voice on top of it is just amazing. So I'm a little bit obsessing over that recently, and it has me connecting. Music is a higher power for me, and so this is exactly what I've been needing, just feeling that connection. Just today I was at work and feeling tensed up, and another song I cannot pronounce at all, two words that start with F, Fylgija, Futhorck, or something like that. I put that on and meditated for 10 minutes, and it was just amazing.
So when you're doing that, I'm just curious, are you just trying to listen to all the different sounds and beats? Is that what you're focusing on, or are you? I'm just curious in your meditative practice with that. That fascinates me.
Yeah. So for that, I just I usually, when I'm driving, I don't close my eyes, but I can get into
wise choice.
meditative state with it. But just the some of the songs have this repeating rhythmic pattern that just becomes trance-like, and all of a sudden, if I keep chanting this, it becomes like a mantra, and whatever kind of shit I was thinking about prior to that just kind of fades away, and then I can just get lost into the music, into the rhythms, and then by the time it's over, my body feels different, and I can't really describe exactly what it is, but I feel totally different after listening to that for 8 to 15 minutes, depending on what song is playing. But like when I'm the song that I mentioned, that I listened to today, has just this really soft tempo, really slow tempo, and it becomes kind of ethereal, whereas some of the other ones are fast and rhythmic, but the chanting becomes kind of definitely, like I said earlier, mantra like, and just that repeating mantra puts me into a state where I can just lose my sense of self and just experience it and feel something different. And like with higher power stuff, I can't describe it, I don't understand it, so it's definitely a power greater than myself, and I feel that sense of awe.
Yeah, I think that's something I'm gonna have to try. I've kind of done it, but I think maybe I need to try it and take it a little more, I get seriously isn't the right word, but just try it with more. I don't know what the right word is, but I like it. What you're saying rings true to me, and I feel like it might be a positive experience for myself as well.
Yeah, I basically give myself a timeout. Whether I'm at work or I'm at home, and then put the headphones on, put the song on, and I'm not working on the computer, I'm not working on other things, I just have that 10 minutes just for myself, and it really doesn't matter where my mind goes with it. So yeah, I'm a horrible meditator. I think a lot of us complain about that, but I just sit still and jam out to the song in any way that that is feeling comfortable for me. Sometimes it's just laying there, sometimes it's just kind of pounding my legs to the rhythm, but as long as I'm not doing something else, getting sidetracked by an email coming in, or paperwork that I need to process, things like that, and just putting the focus on just putting on the headphones and listening. Simple as that.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. I know. I'll definitely try it, and I'm hoping they come out here one day for a concert, man. Once I discovered them, I always looked like, okay, they got concerts coming to California.
Yeah.
Because I just seen a YouTube video of one of their concerts, and I was like, oh my gosh, that looks like a mystical experience in and of itself.
Yeah, I just missed them. They played San Francisco in January of 2020.
Dang.
Yeah, I went to see my favorite band, Tool, the same week that they played San Francisco. So it was, I couldn't couldn't do the 2 shows in 1 week, but they are playing at Red Rocks in Colorado in October, and I have
I've seen that.
a bunch of friends that are going, and I am so jealous. I wish I could do that, but yeah, I'd love it if they came back out here to California.
Yeah, it'd be amazing.
Yeah.
I've never been to a music concert. My wife and I were going to my first one. I'm pretty sure it's her first one. I think it's 21 Pilots, the band.
Oh yeah.
Is 21 Pilots the one that sings the song Ride?
I think so.
I don't know. It's them or Imagine. I don't know which. I just knew it was a band she liked. It's at the Greek Theater in LA, which is like a pretty intimate venue from what I've read. So I'm excited. I've never been to something like that, and it'll be. Yeah, I'm excited. So
yeah, it'll be an awesome experience. Yeah, I've been going to concerts since I was like 13, something like that. So yeah, I just love the live music experience, and I haven't been able to see a band since the lockdown. So I'm looking forward to getting out there and hearing live music again. Well, David, I think we are just about at our time. Was there anything else that you wanted to share before we close out?
Nope. I think I've said all that I should say.
All right. Well, cool.
Hey, yeah. Thanks. I appreciate this opportunity. I do appreciate your group getting this set up. I'm sure I have no idea how much time this is a commitment for you. And I appreciate it. It inspires me to think of more non-traditional ways to try to serve SAA as well. So, thank you for putting these out here. And yeah, thanks again for letting me come on. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I appreciate you for joining me, and I hope to see you on a meeting sometime soon.
Yes, sir.
All right, cool.
You have a good night.
All right, you too, David.
Bye.
That was such a fun conversation, and thanks again to David for sharing his story here with us on the podcast. I don't know if you could tell, David called into Zoom, and I've been wanting to test out to see how that would sound, and I think it sounded pretty good. I have a few other interviews possibly lining up in the future, people who do not have access to a computer and have been asking about the ability to call into Zoom to be able to record. So we have another option. Before getting to the music of Heilung that we talked about in this conversation, I wanted to get to an email that I got just the other night. And this is from Jeff in Canada. Good morning, afternoon. Just started listening to your podcast on my semi-daily walk. Today I listened to episode number 25, which is Feeling Overwhelmed, and then 23. And the title of that one is Creative Energy, Music in the Outer Circle. Back to the email. I was feeling a bit overwhelmed before, but feel more grounded now. Thanks. And I quite liked many of the music clips you played. I am typically a classic rock to 80s pop kind of person, but those clips really picked me up. Thanks again. I will be back. And I love that you still burn CDs. I have a large box of blanks if you need them. LOL. Yes, I am still burning CDs, making mixes, and enjoying it. And I just got a new disc burner. So, another episode where I really talked about a lot of different types of music, from John Denver to Bach to Metallica, Primus, India Ari, Matisyahu, Johnny Cash, and of course Tool, is on episode 9, and I think the title of that one is I Came to Believe, Finding a Higher Power Through Music, or Music and Recovery. It's basically a workshop that I have led a few times at our local Bay Area retreat and once at the International Convention. So check that one out if you're interested in how music can play into your recovery. So the music of Heilung has really factored a lot into my recovery lately. And it's not just me. I'm grateful to have met David and talked about that. A couple other program friends have been listening as well. Others seeking help from the anxieties of the world, wanting to meditate, slow down, reconnect with an ancient spirit, reconnect with their roots, has really led them to this music. And so I wanted to play a little clip before getting to the music of the band in an interview. And the band is essentially three people. Maria, who does the female vocals, Christopher, who does a lot of the low throat singing and is responsible for a lot of the music and loops that they use, and Kai, who does the more aggressive vocals. And Kai, in this interview, talked about why he thinks that people are really connecting with their music.
We have people that write to us that when they listen to Heilung, that they overcome depression. We have people who use our music in ayahuasca ceremonies to, open up much more than before. We have I have several times heard that people who suffer from tinnitus gain relief when listening to that, and there's endless numbers of people who listen to it either in the concert or on headphones, and who really have really epiphanic experiences, be it ecstatic through dancing, or be it meditative, completely coming to rest and reconnect to themselves, to the matrix, to the person that they're meant to be, something like that, something very simple.
I really wanted to play a little bit more of this interview, but I know this episode's going to be kind of long with the other clips that I'm going to play of the music. In that interview, Maria talked about some of the songs that they're just this wall of sound, just pushing through, pushing. And then when it's after 10 minutes of it, it's this release, a cathartic release. And I have not been able to pinpoint exactly what it is or why it works, but it has done something for me. So if it connects for you, awesome. If it doesn't, that's fine as well. And yeah, I don't really want to make this a Heilung podcast, but something that is going on with me currently. Reconnecting me to my higher power. So I really wanted to share that with everyone. So the music, the songs that we talked about, the two pieces that I'm going to be playing here, the one that David mentioned was called Alfadhirhaiti. Trying to pronounce the DH, it's a little bit like a TH, Alfadhirhaiti. And it sounds like in the song he says Alfadhirhaiti, but I'm not quite sure exactly how it's pronounced. And that one, I'll play the clips for in a little bit. It is a form of incantation song that in Old Norse is called Galdir. And Galdir is kind of a spell incantation, combination of words, chanting for magical power. I am just finding a lot of this stuff fascinating. Ancient Norse pagan stuff has been interesting to me. I've been watching the television show Vikings and catching up on that. So a lot of this is playing into that as well. And I'm getting to learn how to pronounce things and what's the origin of a lot of this stuff is. I have no clue, but it's brilliant. And the other song is called Fylgija Futhorck. And Fylgija, that term means follower or protective spirit. And it is just a mesmerizing piece of music. The beginning is in, I think, old High German. It could be Proto-Germanic, but it's two voices going back and forth. Basically, Kai is kind of doing a little bit of a chant in the beginning, and one of the other background vocalists is kind of bouncing his words, kind of offset, like in a round, like a row, row, row your boat type of thing. I'll play a little bit of that here.
Bleibt Ekel jedem Edeling, wenn faules Fleisch sich kehrt, stoisch, klar, grausam, kühl, fahren die Gaben hin, verfaulen Gaben, Freude bricht, fort, Verträge brechen, Trab bleibt Ekel jedem Edeling, wenn faules Fleisch sich kehrt, stoisch, klar, grausam, kühl, fahren die Gaben hin.
And after that bit, Maria comes in with her voice, and I believe the words, the translation that I've seen, the translations are the same. I'm not sure what language she's singing in, but again, this slow beat, the low drone, and her soothing voice really has me drifting off. So I'll put this on my headphones, close my eyes, and meditate whenever I'm feeling stressed at work, or if I just need 10 to 12 minutes of reconnecting, I'll put this on. So mesmerizing. And kind of the flip side of that is what I talked about earlier, the Galder. And this song is Alfadhirhaiti. It is a praise to Odin. The beginning is a dedication to Odin's spear. Kai going back and forth, call and response with the warriors. And I'm not sure if I mentioned it, when Heilung performs live, they also have additional singers, lots of percussionists, and warriors up on stage with shields and spears. And so they are part of this song as well as a few others. And I mentioned that this song is part of my And the rest of the song is reciting the names of things that are involved with Odin: his wolves, his ravens, his horse, his ring, and the various names of Odin. And it just it starts off with Christopher and Kai doing the throat vocals, and then each passing round of the incantation, the warriors join in, more percussion joins in, more instrumentation, and it just builds and builds and builds, and it's mesmerizing, it's energetic, and such an amazing, energetic piece of music. I love this. And like with so many of their songs, when it's playing and I need to stop, it's hard to find a good place to stop the music because the beats keep driving. A lot of times when I am pulling up to my parking spot and the song is right in the middle, I'll just keep the song playing until it's done, or I'm at a good breaking spot. But it is so awesome. I hope you really enjoyed this music. I'll be sharing some more of their songs in the future. That's about all I have for this week. So if you are interested in leaving feedback, you can leave that at the email address feedback@sexaddictsrecoverypod.com, or contact me personally, jason@sexaddictsrecoverypod.com, if you wish to be a guest on a future episode. And Heilung ends a few of their songs with the words Alu is urki, which means may it be of help. I thank you so much for listening to this episode this week, and as always, keep coming back. The views and opinions contained in the Sex Addicts Recovery Podcast are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect those of the Bay Area Intergroup or the ISO of SAA.